I married an old man to save my family, but the night he revealed who he really was, I realized the marriage was never the real trap.
Welcome to Betty's Magical Stories, where ordinary lives hide extraordinary secrets, and every story comes with a twist you won't forget.
When the old man I had to marry for money took off his mask, I understood everything. That sentence sounds like gossip you'd hear whispered in a crowded room, the kind that makes people lean in without realizing they've stopped breathing. And honestly, that's exactly how my life felt back then, like I was trapped inside a story everyone wanted to comment on, but no one really understood.
It started the way many quiet scandals do, with a family problem no one wanted to admit out loud. My family was drowning in debt, the kind that doesn't come from luxury, but from medical bills, failed businesses, and years of trying to look fine when everything was falling apart. We smiled at neighbors, paid what we could, and pretended tomorrow would somehow fix itself. It didn't. One evening, when the lights flickered because the bill was overdue again, the truth finally surfaced.
There was an offer, a solution, a marriage. He was described to me as an old man, wealthy, reclusive, respected, and, most importantly, willing to help my family in exchange for a legal union. No romance, no expectations beyond appearances, they said. Just a contract disguised as a wedding. People like to pretend this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore, but it does, quietly, neatly wrapped in words like security and stability. I remember sitting there, listening, feeling like I was watching a news report about someone else's life. My name kept coming up, but it didn't feel real. Everyone avoided my eyes. The decision had already been made long before I was told. I didn't cry, not at first. I just felt hollow, like a room after all the furniture has been removed.
When I finally met him, the rumors didn't lie about his age. He walked slowly, spoke carefully, and had a presence that made people straighten their backs. But what stood out most was how distant he seemed. Polite, yes. Cold? Absolutely. His eyes never lingered. His face never fully relaxed. It was as if he were always wearing something invisible between himself and the world. The wedding was small, efficient, and strangely silent. No laughter, no chaos, just signatures, photographs, and a sense that something irreversible had happened. The money arrived almost immediately. Debts were paid, phones stopped ringing with threats, my family slept better at night, and I moved into a house that felt more like a museum than a home. Living with him was quiet. We rarely spoke beyond what was necessary. We ate meals at different times. He traveled often, or so I was told. When he was home, he stayed in his study, surrounded by files and locked drawers. It felt less like a marriage and more like sharing a building with a ghost. People assumed things. They always do. Friends I barely spoke to anymore sent messages filled with fake concern and hidden judgment. Strangers online speculated freely. I became a topic, not a person. She did it for the money. She sold herself. She must be miserable. Some of those things were true. Others weren't that simple. What confused me most was him. For someone supposedly powerful and in control, he seemed tense, constantly watching, constantly calculating. Sometimes I caught him staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not desire, not anger, but something closer to recognition, as if he knew me from somewhere I couldn't remember. The mask came off on a night I never planned for. There was a storm, the kind that rattles windows and makes the world feel smaller. The power went out, and for the first time since I moved in, the house felt alive. I found him in the living room, sitting in the dark, no lamp, no files, just him and the sound of rain. He asked me to sit.
His voice was different, tired, stripped of its usual control. And then he told me the truth. Not all at once, but slowly, like someone unloading a burden they'd carried for too long. He wasn't just a wealthy old man. He was a man who had spent decades building a system of protection around himself. The mask wasn't literal, but it might as well have been. The distant behavior, the coldness, the secrecy, it was all deliberate. Years ago, he had trusted the wrong people. Family, partners, friends. They took advantage of him, drained him, and left him with money but no peace. Since then, he lived behind walls, testing everyone who came close.
Our marriage wasn't about ownership or control in the way people assumed. It was about observation. He wanted someone who didn't want him, someone honest about their motives, money for security, no lies about love. In his mind, that honesty was safer than affection. As he spoke, pieces clicked into place. The careful distance, the lack of expectations, the way he never touched, never demanded, never crossed lines. He wasn't hiding cruelty, he was hiding fear. And then came the part that changed everything. He told me he'd already arranged something else, a way out. The marriage contract had an expiration, when he never mentioned because he wanted to see who I would be when I thought there was no escape. Would I manipulate him? Would I humiliate him? Would I turn bitter and cruel? Or would I remain myself? That was the moment I understood everything. Not just him, but the situation I was in. I wasn't trapped in a story about greed or sacrifice. I was inside a test built from two broken circumstances colliding. I didn't suddenly feel love. This wasn't a fairy tale twist. What I felt was clarity. For the first time, I saw him not as an obstacle or a symbol of my family's desperation, but as a deeply cautious human being who had mistaken control for safety. After that night, things didn't magically improve, but they changed. We talked more, not about feelings, but about life, about mistakes, about how money can solve problems and create new ones at the same time. The house felt less like a museum and more like a place where two people existed honestly, even if imperfectly. News travels fast, even when nothing official changes. People noticed differences. He smiled more in public. I looked less like someone waiting for rescue. Speculation shifted. The narrative always does. But the truth stayed between us, quiet and steady. When the contract ended, I was given a choice: stay or leave with enough to build a life without fear. No pressure, no conditions, just a decision. And that, more than anything else, told me who he really was. I left. Not because I hated him, not because I felt used, but because understanding everything doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it just means you're finally free to choose without confusion. Today, when people bring up my story like it's entertainment, like a dramatic headline, I let them talk. They'll never know the full picture anyway. They'll never understand that the mask wasn't about deception, it was about survival, and that sometimes the most shocking reveal isn't a hidden villain, but a hidden truth that forces you to grow up faster than you expected. That's what happened when the old man I had to marry for money took off his mask. I didn't just understand him, I understood myself. Like, subscribe, and stay with Betty's Magical Stories, because the most magical moments are always the ones you never see coming.